Welcome back to Fox Eyes on the Hill Live this Sunday morning. We want to turn now to the war in Ukraine. When Russia invaded Ukraine in February of 2022, the U.S. had to act fast to get its ambassador and the rest of the diplomatic corps out of that country. Since then, the United States has spent more than $6 billion to support Ukraine militarily. And now, with the new Trump administration coming in, how will things change? We are pleased this morning to welcome in Ambassador John Sullivan. He is with us this morning. He was in Russia at the time of the invasion of Ukraine, and this is his new book, Midnight in Moscow, a memoir from the front lines of Russia's war against the West. Ambassador, thank you for being with us here. Obviously, the entire country has followed the events in Ukraine, but it is easy to forget about those early moments.
Yeah.
So take us back to the genesis of this book. You were there,
right.
You learned of this, and then everything just went into fast forward.
Yeah, so we in the U.S. government knew that Putin was going to invade before the invasion started. What we didn't expect was the will and the capability of the Ukrainians to resist. And what people forget is there's a static, relatively static front line. The Russians have been making some advances in recent months, but the brutality of that early phase of the war, that first year, when Russia tried to conquer Ukraine with a three-pronged invasion and the war crimes and the number of people who were killed, it was really a brutal war. It is a brutal war, and it was quite bracing to be the U.S. ambassador dealing with that government in Moscow, knowing what they were doing in Ukraine.
Are you surprised the Ukrainians have been able to hold on as long as they have?
I was in late February and in March when the war first started. I didn't think, like the Russians, thought that this war was going to be over, or at least the major combat operations. So once they defeated that early Russian thrust, now, the Ukrainian will to resist, their ability to resist, it doesn't surprise me now.
When President-elect Trump talked about the war in Ukraine during the second presidential debate, the one against Kamala Harris,
right.
He said he would end the Ukrainian war quickly. He didn't say that that meant Ukraine wins.
Right.
So what can we expect from the second Trump administration in regards to how it handles a war they did not start but are now going to be handed once they take office?
Well, I'll remind your viewers of another thing that President Trump said in the first debate with President Biden. He was asked, do you want to see Putin win? And he said it without hesitating, no. So he's got a strong desire to see the violence end. I do. No one wants to see innocent people killed and internally displaced refugees and so forth. It's going to be a lot more difficult than I think the president, at least the president-elect, has said in the campaign. It's going to take time, and the new administration will be dealing with an even more difficult and hardened administration in the Kremlin that is not going to be in the mood for compromise.
What did the Russians tell you about why they are doing this? Was this simply a land grab?
It is, at its base, a land grab, but they've been talking about this. Putin, their president, had been talking about this for years. And we in the United States, in particular, don't do a good job of listening. And they'd been warning what they were going to do, what Putin was going to do for a long time, and ultimately is, at base, a land grab. It's part of Putin's nationalist empire building that he's set about.
One of the other things that is concerning to a lot of our allies right now is what this will have to do with NATO under a second Trump administration. Obviously, the former president had a lot to say about NATO over the last few years, that other countries didn't pay their full share, but yet they are the ones kind of facing Russia right now as they watch this go on. How are they calculating as we move into 2025 about what this might mean for our NATO ally?
Well, first of all, before I was ambassador in Russia, I was President Trump's deputy secretary of state for 3 years, and I heard him almost on a daily basis challenging, urging our NATO allies to meet the commitments that they had made for increased defense spending. The war in Ukraine, this new war that started in President Biden's term, proved that President Trump was right. In fact, the German government has said that they were going to increase defense spending right after the war started.
I want to get your take on something. We had an item in the newscast earlier about Russian inflation and how the ruble has just dived right now. You know, if you study history and you know what happened to the German economy prior to World War II, it's got to set off an alarm bell in your head about what's going on in the Russian economy and how that could affect, you know, world affairs. How do you see this?
So Putin is mortgaging the future of Russia and the Russian people for his war in Ukraine. Yes, they're able to maintain their defense industrial base. They are pumping money out to recruit soldiers, to pay the families of those soldiers who were killed, but it's creating rampant inflation in Russia. You know what it reminds me of, Tom? Guns and butter in the United States in the 1960s, war in Vietnam, Great Society programs of Lyndon Johnson. The United States paid for that ultimately with brutal inflation in the 70s into the 90s. It's going to be worse in Russia in the future.
So just to bring this home quickly, it would serve Russia's economic interest as well, probably to park their war against Ukraine because they are spending capital that they don't have.
Absolutely. It would serve the long-term interests of the Russian people, not the short-term interests of Vladimir Putin.
The book is Midnight in Moscow, a memoir from the front lines of Russia's war against the West by Ambassador John J. Sullivan. We thank you so much.
Thanks,
We're hoping
Tom.
to have you come back in the future.
My pleasure.
All right.